The continually undermanned Minnesota Twins have entered a free fall, unraveling at the seams as they try to hold on to the final wild card spot and limp into the playoffs. The frustration was palpable in an ugly 2-5 week that leaves Minnesota closer to missing the postseason than winning the division. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Nick Nelson. Welcome to the Twins Daily Week in Review podcast. Wish I had some cheerier content to cover this week, but it was a bit of a rough one. Nonetheless, we will unpack it all from the past 7 days and 7 games of Twins baseball with your weekly snapshot for Monday, September 2nd through Sunday, September 8th. The Twins' record last week was 2-5, as I mentioned, in these 7 games. That leaves their overall record at 76 and 67. Their run differential for the past week, negative 13. They were outscored by 13 runs. Their overall mark on the season still plus 38, but that has been coming down swiftly over the past couple weeks. And the Twins now standing alone at third place in the AL Central. They are 5.5 games behind division-leading Cleveland. The dream of overtaking them and winning the Central pretty much out the door. And the Twins also a game and a half behind the Kansas City Royals for second place in the wild card race as well as the division. So let's unpack the sweep in Kansas City that leaves them in that state, as well as the rest of the week's action here with a game-by-game review of these past 7 games for the Twins. Opened the week on Monday in Tampa Bay with a 5-4 victory, some key hits and clutch relief in that one. Boy, that feels like a long ways away now. The following day, the Bats unable to awaken against Jeffrey Springs and the Rays bullpen. Twins losing that game 2-1. On Wednesday, Louis Varland served as the bulk pitcher and had a meltdown in the 4th inning. Defense also with a really rough showing in that game, a 9-4 lopsided loss against the Rays. On Thursday, Pablo Lopez with a strong performance. He was able to lead the way in a 4-3 victory, the Twins salvaging a split in Tampa, despite not playing very well there. At which point they headed to Kansas City for a big showdown at Kauffman Stadium, a lot of implications in the wild card race and potentially the division race here. And the Twins just did not show up for this series at all. Lost 5-0 on Friday, going quietly in the opener, unable to score a run. On Saturday, they lost 4-2 with the bullpen blowing up in the 8th inning, wasting a gem from Bailey Ober. And on Sunday, the Twins went quietly again in a sweep, a 2-0 loss, unable to produce anything at all offensively in that game. Again, very poor defense on display. So let's take a look at the news and notes here from the past 7 days. It is all hands on deck for the injury-ravaged Minnesota Twins, who now find themselves just 3.5 games in front of Seattle for that final playoff slot. Last week, Max Kepler joined Byron Buxton and Carlos Correa on the injured list, with Deshaun Kiersey Jr. called up to try and help fill the growing veteran void in the lineup. Michael Hellman had been promoted from AAA days earlier, bringing into the fold 2 players with 0 major league experience in the heat of a postseason race. Far from ideal, that goes without saying. Carlos Correa remains sidelined indefinitely. No real news or update on him. Buxton's return now very much in question after he experienced a setback with some pain in that right hip while he was rehabbing in St. Paul on Wednesday. I think I would not expect him to return this season at this point, to be honest. Maybe for the playoffs is the best you can hope for, I think. Kepler, who's been dealing with this knee issue for, I think, pretty much the entire season after he fouled a ball in the opener off of his knee. I've been trying to battle through it and not playing well at all lately. So I think his timeline very much unclear now that he's been shut down. I think if the Twins can't get to a point where they're confident that he can give them more than he has over these past couple months, where he's been a real zero net contributor, then there's no real point in trying to bring him back, which I think would be a sad end for the franchise's longest tenured player. Louis Varland was recalled to serve as bulk pitcher in Wednesday's game against Tampa Bay, with Diego Castillo optioned to the minors to make room. As I mentioned, it did not go well. Varland did get through 2 perfect innings in the 2nd and 3rd before the Rays just totally jumped all over him in the 3rd inning. He allowed 8 runs while recording only 1 out. And with that, the inevitable became official for Louis Varland. On Friday, the Twins announced that he will be formally transitioning to a bullpen role. And sounds like he'll probably getting started in that role this week after taking a few days to recuperate from that bulk start. Let's take a look at the highlights. There were a few. If the Twins are able to hang on and reach the playoffs, they've got the makings of a formidable short series rotation. Pablo Lopez and Bailey Ober delivered strong outings in their latest turns, and both went deep into the game, which the team is counting on them to do in support of a depleted bullpen. Lopez struck out 9 over 6 2/3 innings in a win over Tampa on Thursday, and Ober hurled 7 shutout frames against Kansas City to slay his Royals demons on Saturday night. Since the halfway point of June, Bailey Ober and Pablo Lopez rank 8th and 12th, respectively, among qualified MLB pitchers in ERA. That is what you want in your 1-2 starters as you look ahead to a potential postseason series. Meanwhile, David Festa is quickly solidifying his standing, I think, as third in line for any potential postseason scenario. He is missing bats at a fantastic rate, while continuing to showcase surprisingly sharp command on the mound. Facing Tampa on Tuesday, the rookie fanned 7 with only 1 walk over 5 frames of 2-run ball. That leaves his ERA at 3.13 in 37 1/3 innings since his latest call-up after the All-Star break. He's looked really, really good and quite dominant in his last few turns, so that's a very promising development for the top prospect. Unfortunately, this trio of starting pitchers essentially represented the extent of positives in what was, all things considered, probably the worst week of the season for the Twins. With that, let's dive into some of the lowlights of the past 7 days. The Twins lineup is not producing enough to win games, plain and simple. There are many other contributing culprits you can point toward in this ongoing backslide to sub-mediocrity, whether it's ill-timed meltdowns from pitchers, questionable managerial decisions, consistently very poor defensive play, but the lack of run scoring overshadows it all. The Twins are without their 2 best hitters, and they're just going to have to get used to it, unfortunately. In all likelihood, Correa and Buxton are not coming back, at least until the very end of the season, if at all. Kepler is also probably, I would guess, down for the year. In the absence of these lineup cornerstones, the Twins need the rest of their key bats to step up. They do have some depth. That's been a recurring call to action that is perpetually not being answered. Slumping Royce Lewis is at the forefront of the team's struggles. Without his spark, the Twins seem completely bereft of energy or life. He went 4 for 25. That's a 160 average last week, 7 strikeouts, and he has homered just once and barely, put it in the flower pots at Target Field. In his past 24 games after going deep 15 times in his first 40 games. Lewis looks less like a hitter who's going through a standard run-of-the-mill slump and more like a guy who is physically depleted and grinding. He's more or less admitted as much. And that makes it difficult to trust that there is significant improvement on the way unless he can somehow find a second wind. Maybe giving him a break, an IL stint or something of that nature would be warranted. Obviously, the Twins need to win enough games to make the playoffs, but it seems like a moot point if Royce Lewis is this version of himself, looking very worn down. You wonder how much physical wear and tear has also taken a toll on Willie Castro, who's known to have battled back troubles this year and has seen his production plummet in the second half. He went 1 for 18 this past week with 7 strikeouts. And since the All-Star break, when he appeared in the All-Star game, batting just .206 with 11 extra base hits in 45 games. In the same category as these two, unproductive, possibly unhealthy, you've got Brooks Lee, who came back after missing time with a shoulder injury, but looks much the same as he did before going down, which is to say, totally punchless at the plate. Brooks Lee went 3 for 21 last week with no walks, and he had some tough rookie moments in the field at shortstop. I mean, that's just a lot to withstand. No Correa, no Buxton, no Kepler. Lewis, Castro, and Lee all offering next to nothing at the plate. Even with the occasional flashes from guys like Matt Wallner and Trevor Larnach, and even lately Edouard Julien, the lineup isn't going to function with all of its core fixtures either literally or figuratively absent. And as more at-bats start inevitably getting directed to the likes of Hellman and Kiersey, the Twins will be at risk of a fully fledged 2022-style collapse unless their remaining talent can step up. Overall, this team is in a miserable state. The defense has been utterly atrocious in terms of both execution and decision making. This is costing a pitching staff that is already stretched and lurching. Tommy Watkins has been repeatedly making inexcusably bad calls as third base coach, windmilling slow runners to the plate and costing an offense that is also already stretched. On top of that, the Twins have just been horribly unlucky. Low quality contact leading to runs for the opposition in key spots over and over again. How many times have we seen with a go ahead or tying run on base and a guy on third that there's just a chopper or a bleeder that, you don't really have a chance to make a play on, and that's that. You add this litany of compounding factors on top of the challenging circumstances that this team already faces in terms of all these injuries and all this weight that they're trying to bear, and you've got the recipe for an all-out free fall. We are seeing it. By virtue of their stellar midsummer run and the widespread mediocrity in the middle of the American League pack, the Twins are still highly likely to reach the playoffs. But this is not a group that currently inspires any confidence as a legitimate contender. They are shrinking as the weight of the moment continues to grow. Let's move on to our trending storyline for the week, which I think really is just, where do you go from here? Will there be a shakeup of some kind in the wake of this pitiful series in Kansas City? Uncontained frustration was really the theme of the week for the Twins, and understandably so. We saw Buxton get ejected from a minor league game for barking at an ump on Wednesday. Buck has never been kicked out of a game in his career before. Around the same time, Louis Varland exploded with screaming rage on the mound in Tampa Bay as his starting career likely reached an end right before our eyes with that disastrous outing. And then, following Sunday's lifeless loss to clinch that sweep in Kansas City, Rocco Baldelli declined to take questions or offer comment to reporters other than, quote unquote, "That was an unprofessional series of baseball we played, and that's all I've got for you." There are 3 weeks and 19 games remaining on the schedule. The math is still in favor of the Twins, who miraculously maintain an 87% chance of making the postseason, according to Fangraphs. But those playoff odds don't mean squat if they can't win some ball games and hold their ground here. If this team keeps playing the way they have, they are at very much at risk of getting past. You wonder if some sort of significant last-ditch gambit to disrupt the stuffy current status quo might be in play. I'm not sure what that would look like. I know one possibility that's been mentioned on Twins Daily in recent days was a promotion of Emmanuel Rodriguez. He is one of the top prospects in the system. He's on the 40-man roster, currently at AAA. Would be a very aggressive, perhaps brazen move, but if you're trying to capture lightning in a bottle and shake things up, I think that and everything else should be on the table. Here's the deal. You cannot take for granted when you get a real shot at October. And while the Twins are far from the shape that they hoped that they would be at this stage of the game, they still very much have that shot here in the middle of September. The front office and coaching staff should be aiming to do anything and everything in their power to avoid the catastrophic scenario where they miss out. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting week. And with that, we look ahead to the next week to close out the show as we always do. And I guess this is an opportunity to end on some good news because, looking at the schedule, this is a get-right week if I've ever seen one. The Twins return to Target Field on Monday for a 6-game homestand against sub-500 teams, starting with 3 against an Angels club with the 4th worst record in baseball. Twins get an off day on Thursday, which will be very welcome. That'll be their first day off in 2 weeks. And then they will face the Cincinnati Reds at home over the weekend. It is imperative that the team get on track and fatten up a bit in these 2 series because afterward looms the most critical gauntlet stretch in the remaining schedule, a 7-game road trip through Cleveland and Boston that their season very well might end up hinging on. So a bit of a nerve-wracking time here as the Twins continue to slide a very, very rough series that's left everyone very frustrated. So we'll see how they come home and bounce back. Let's take a look here quickly to close out at these matchups for the upcoming series. The Angels will be throwing lefty Reed Detmers and righties Griffin Canning and Jack Kochanowicz in the series at Target Field here to open the week. The Twins will be countering with David Festa, Pablo Lopez, and Zebby Matthews. And then for the weekend series, it'll be Ober, Simeon Woods Richardson, and David Festa for the Twins. The Reds throwing Nick Martinez, Rhett Lauder, and a TBD starter on Friday. So, yeah, I mean, you got to hope the Twins can come home and as I said, get right, start to get this thing moving in the right direction here. Only 3 weeks left. But if they're not able to enjoy some success here in this coming week, it's going to be a pretty dire situation. So hoping we have better things to look forward to talking about next week. We appreciate you joining us as always for the Week in Review podcast. Please feel free to give the show a review on your podcast platform of choice if you enjoy it. Leave some comments on the column at the website and come let us know what you think. Let's talk about what's happening to the Twins and what they need to do here to get back on track before the end of the season. Thanks for joining, folks. We'll see you next week.